Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on martial politics. Hope you all are having an excellent Sunday. I will be uploading this video on Sunday. I hope you all are having a good day. And today I'm going to be discussing a class discussion we had in school about 4 days, no, 3 days ago. Sorry, no, 2 days ago on Thursday. Um, so I'm in an AP US history class, and I have problems with how school districts determine intelligence and who gets into what classes and whatever. But that's besides the point. That might be a topic for another video. Um, it just more has to do with my general discontent with the whole educational system, how really arbitrary it is. But in this video, it will connect actually to um, other educational institutions I'll get to later on in this video. But what I have to discuss in this video is this discussion that we had in class, and I found it really revealing about how really there's such a significant divide, not even just through gender, but I think also what we're gonna see later. This is why I have this article on my screen. I'll get to how um, basically these class differences are accelerating political differences and polarization, I'd say. So that's gonna be basically the end of the video. That's gonna be my thesis. But what I'm going to discuss now is basically in our class we're learning about how the founders intended for the Constitution to be interpreted, what it was created for, various stuff like that, pretty simple stuff, really. Um, and we were discussing the First Amendment, and basically the teacher, he posted an assignment. He was like, "Oh, give your opinion on." He basically posted like this op-ed from like 2015. It was like entirely nonpartisan. You couldn't really tell if he was left wing or right wing. But I think of course, this poses a very crucial question. And the reason why is because, of course, we've seen such a rising amount of, I'd say, censorship, not even just of right wing people, but also just really anyone who questions the status quo. I mean, you've even seen this with some progressives who are skeptical of the vaccine, like Jimmy Dore, for example. These people have been, they've been slandered by these neoliberals on Twitter who are, they're insane. They're not the brightest people in the room, but there are people, uh, like people who are, I'd say, are anti-establishment or just don't carry the line of the regime. And basically, these people have been silenced completely. I mean, one of the earliest examples is like Alex Jones, I think in 2018 maybe, where he was basically just banned from everything, Facebook, Twitter, everything. Um, and obviously, most recently, we've seen this with Donald Trump. And of course, I disagree with Donald Trump on some couple of things. But I'm not gonna. I'm not some authoritarian pro censorship psycho who just wants to silence their political opposition so their ideas maintain dominance in you know, in the marketplace of ideas, as I like to call it. And what um, really the huge issue with basically this political censorship, I'd say, is of course, I mean, it's a blatant violation of the spirit and the really how the First Amendment should actually be applied. Um, that is really just unacceptable, really. And a more concerning thing is how this has been used to you know accelerate division, I'd say, too, because then you create different tribal factions who are like, oh, I want to suppress my opponents, and then it causes mess, really, and it's not really productive for a healthy society. I wouldn't say we're a healthy society right now, for a multitude of different reasons, and this is one of them. Um, but basically, they've, what these larger technology companies are doing, I'd say, is really just disrupting the free transfer of information. Um, I mean, like, you have basically anyone who's opposed to the whatever the ideological positions of Twitter or anyone in the U.S. government, and these people are basically silenced and harassed. I mean, it's nothing new really, but when you see it online, not even just against regular people, but you see it against the sitting. He was a sitting. Trump was president when his account was taken down by Twitter, a multinational corporation, and his administration didn't take any action to stop these people. And I think that if a Republican administration is elected in 2024, an actual good one, not like some weak garbage administration, but an administration that will actually push for actual national populism, which not that likely, but there is a chance they could carry some principles of it. But one of the things they should do is um, basically just apply the First Amendment to these social media platforms and basically put them under uh, federal regulation. Um, and this is gonna this is a good transition to what I'm gonna talk about, of what some girls in the class discussion said. They basically said the same thing. It's kind of a shared mentality. I'd like to say among them, I think it was three or four, basically said the same exact thing. And what these people basically argue is that how does the federal government even have the authority to regulate these companies? Shouldn't business be left within basically the domain, basically the power of the business owner? They shouldn't be limited by the government. And like, where does this, what does this remind you of? It says right here. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's a very, I mean, that's like a core libertarian argument. That's not even just like a, you know, that's a core to libertarian ideology. Um, and I find this really curious actually, because I'm pretty sure like all these girls are, they support the Democratic Party in some way. And I do live in a pretty, I'd say relative, kind of a swing area actually. But there definitely are, I mean, based off where these people live, they live in, well-off suburban communities. I'm pretty sure, I don't think they're like big supporters of Donald Trump. Um, so basically, it kind of ties to a whole other thing where it's like, why is the Democratic Party making its members think like, oh, follow this, laissez-faire economic standard, which is like, I'd say, a very, traditionally Republican position. Like, for example, Calvin Coolidge, when he was president, I mean, he's probably the best example of a laissez-faire president. I mean, he did, you know, almost zero, actually, pretty much zero interference in the economy. And there definitely was a boom in that period, but then, what happens when, you have the excesses of capital and, greed? What does that lead to? It leads to a crash. And, economic crashes are really just natural in a economic cycle. You have what is it, a bull market and then bear market. Bull is the increase, and then the bear is the downturn. And that's just sort of natural in an economic cycle. But whatever. I kind of got a little sidetracked there, but um, it's really interesting how they did copy this basically libertarian argument, like, oh, they're business owners, they should have the authority over what they do if they're a business. They shouldn't be listening to the federal government now. Like, it really stung me there because it was like, this is the same party of like people who support, Bernie Sanders and like actual economic action, but like they don't want to take economic action when uh whatever it is benefiting them. Like why would they want to why would they want to stop censorship of like political speech? That's actually a very anti-libertarian thing. So like it's not even principled at all. Supporting censorship by multinational. I think even some libertarians actually like speak out against this too, which is like kind of surprising. Some, but not all, obviously. But some do actually speak out against it, and they think that it's not fair, and I happen to agree. Um, but these people, no, they copy sort of libertarian argument and they apply it where it benefits them. Like if I ask them, would you do you think the so then do you think that the government shouldn't have the authority to basically set, you know, a federal minimum wage? Do business owners should they have the freedom to pay their workers basically nothing? Uh, and of course they would say no. Oh yeah, they should. No, of course they wouldn't. And of course I wouldn't either. I'm not saying that I would support that, but um, this stuff does not come from a position of principle, and it's really about power, essentially. And I don't want to whine about this, like, oh, they're using power and we're not. I'm actually like one of the biggest proponents of actually. I argue this a lot in like almost every single one of my videos. We should use government power to our advantage, stifle opposition policies, and strengthen ourselves. Um, and that's like a huge problem in the current Republican Party, but um the Democratic Party, they don't really have that debate because they basically realize that we have to use government power to get what you want. So, um, I found the argument kind of sad, really. And they said like, oh, one girl was like, she said one of the biggest things like misinformation about the coronavirus, and that should be banned, and people who basically spread it should be banned. And the problem I have with that is I mean, there's been so many people who've been, deemed of spreading misinformation about the coronavirus. So, like, I think I think best example recently is with Joe Rogan. This is a huge thing. I'm not like that into it, but I understand the gist of it. Or basically, CNN was basically, I'd say, pretty much slandering him. That he was taking basically horse dewormer to cure the coronavirus when he had it. Um, and he was using it. And they just basically slandered him that he's taking horse horse dewormer and it's insane. He's spreading like they also say like he's spreading medical misinformation about the vaccine. So you know, and it's like I think I actually agree with Joe Rogan's. I think Joe Rogan's position is a bit on the vaccine is basically like younger people you shouldn't have to take it. More vulnerable people should probably take it, and I happen to agree with that position. Um, I mean, I'm not anti-vaccine at all. Actually, I think that vaccines are, I think we're pretty lucky to have them in our modern world, but you you don't need to give a vaccine to a 12-year-old who has a 0.0000 like zero chance of dying at all. So it's kind of illogical when you think of that. And of course, like everyone should have the freedom to pick, should they get if they get the vaccine or not. And right now I'm not vaccinated because I don't think I need to. So but all these people, like when they say like, oh, the government shouldn't regulate, you know, multinational corporations and who they ban and what they do to their to people who are using their platform. When it comes to the freedom to not take the vaccine, these people are all like, oh, we have to stop them. you can't. You have to take the vaccine. It's necessary. You're killing people. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, as Joe Biden said. Which not true, by the way. Because I've ever watched any videos about that. Um, read anything about that. It's pretty obvious that that's not the case. But people don't. These people don't really care. And basically, what I'm gonna get to here is I'll just get to my response, and I say really the division within the class is basically these three or four girls essentially said the same thing. Government should regulate these corporations. They're free to ban whoever they want. People choose to use the platform, so they sign the term of agreement. So they say that they forfeit their rights. Um, which is you know, it's kind of interesting. It's like I don't think that these people. I mean, I'm 100% sure people really don't think about what they believe in and why and how hypocritical it is when you apply to different issues and how they have different standards for certain things. People don't really think of that. These people don't really think of that. Basically, the argument I made is that some girl said like the government doesn't even have the ability, shouldn't even doesn't even have the ability to regulate them, and she basically essentially said it was unconstitutional. She didn't say that term because people aren't. I wouldn't say people in my class are like that brain. They're not really cohesive at making a convincing argument. But my argument. Sorry for that. My position. Was basically that, of course, the federal government has the authority to regulate these social media platforms according to the First Amendment. Um, because you have these social media platforms who are basically controlling uh, basically who sees what information, and I think it's a really dangerous thing to leave. When you leave information, the distribution of information in the hands of some uh, unaccountable corporate oligarchs who don't care about the public good at all. They only care about, their own wealth and their well-being. They don't care about society as a whole. Um, that was my argument, and thought that it was pretty convincing. There was one other boy who made a somewhat similar argument, basically same conclusion, but as my argument. Basically said that same thing. These corporations, of course, they should all whatever they what all these social media platforms should fall under jurisdiction from the federal government, and it only makes sense for that to be the case, as that case, as that those protections of freedom of speech and you know you'd even say right to protest, because there are people who you know gather to basically plan protests on Twitter too. Um, there's journalists on there, so it also applies with freedom of the press. So that should apply completely to these social media platforms, since they hold such an important hold over information, really, on society, what we learn, the news. I think that it's really important. I think this should apply to companies like Google too. So um, the big thing I noticed, um, it wasn't just the division uh, from genders, also through class, I'd say, economic class. Um, most of most of the people, I think most of the people in the school really are not most actually. I'd say more so in like advanced classes. Uh, these people are much more likely to be of a better economic standing. I mean, I think there's even a study about this. I mean, you could even apply to even like who gets even to college, or who gets into elite educational programs, and it's of course people who are much better well off. They have much more money, of course. um, and what is the major difference you see is where you have a certain economic class. and later on it'll be a social class because these people, I'm pretty sure all of them will be going to college. And in college now, on this article that I'm showing here, it says a generation of American men give up on college, you just feel lost. This was maybe from like a little over a month ago. The number of men enrolled at 2 and 4 year colleges has fallen behind women by record levels and a widening education gap across the US. So, what does this make you think? Well, if you look at exit polls and see, which group of people vote for Republicans and Democrats, you'll see that college educated people are far more likely, especially in states that are, swing states, they're much more likely to vote, for Joe Biden and for Democratic Party candidates. And the opposite is the case for people who don't go to college and maybe go to trade school or something, or just don't go to anything at all. And these people vote for, so I'm not saying all, but a significant amount of them do vote for Republicans and they support Donald Trump. So this is a serious problem. Specifically because the people who are pushing for basically companies being able to do whatever they want, they're part of a, you know, economically more powerful class. And, money equals power, really, and the people who have more money have more power over society. So when you see people like this, not this is like a microcosm, really, of like a larger problem at play. And this is only in one class. I can't even imagine how it is in, you know, my whole county or whole state or the whole country, really, as a whole. Where you see such incredible division. Really, I'd say a lot of hyper partisan behavior uh, in high schools. It's gone significantly worse, I'd say, probably since around, I'd say probably Donald Trump, since around that time where I'd say more and more clear. And of course, it's a very significant problem. So when you have this is very alarming because when you have people who are basically arguing where, these companies should, one girl even said they should censor even more. They should strike down harder on medical misinformation, whatever is deemed that. And of course, there's this term like who's watching the watchman, who is watching the people enforcing the rules. So, you have a fair and equal outcome where you don't have political suppression by a dominant uh, political faction. And this, of course, was a concern that you could say even the founders had. I'd say even if you ever read the Federalist Papers, one of the major concerns, which is highlighted there, is where the founding fathers were very, frightened over the power of majority faction and how they would oppress the minority. And I think this is a perfect case. And when I talk about minority, it's in terms of I say power and influence and wealth. Because of course, people who go to college are much more and graduate a college are far more likely to be making, a higher salary over time. And usually these people hold, a relatively similar ideology, and then they get isolated in higher class circles and they don't really care about, those lowly sorry for that again. Yeah, basically my point was that, when you have a higher class of people who are just like, I'd say very discontent, not basically they look down upon the lower class of people, these peasants, these idiots who are, truckers, and they don't go to college and they're all dumb and they're lazy. I'd say it's a very poisonous mentality, and then in turn that replicates in disdain for also like which political faction these people support, the lower class of people. And then what do you have? You have the oppression of the poor, lower class group of people who are then oppressed by college liberal elites who don't care about their interests. And then meanwhile, they also want to they also want to get rid of the electoral college and make sure that, the interests of these people are never addressed. national level. Um, and that's like just a huge problem, really. Because of course all these people want to eradicate the electoral college. That's like one of the biggest things in the way of their power of actually gaining power and just you know forcing really just a tyranny, really, I'd say. Um, and obviously, I wouldn't. That's a terrible thing to happen, and you know this is basically my conclusion for this, where you have such a uh you have the emergence of an elite who don't care about the interests of the lower educated, the poor, and it leads to first of all leads to selfishness. It leads to self-indulgence, where you have the rich who are just self-indulging on themselves, buying expensive consumer products. Meanwhile, the rest of the country overdoses and life expectancy is falling. Drugs are pouring into communities. People are working, day-to-day jobs, barely making it by. I mean, if you look at this is really just a, context for, I'd say, significant unrest among the population, where you have like this is I you might think I'm going a little too far, but I think this is definitely, I'd say this is a possibility. I'm not saying it will happen, but it definitely is a possibility where you have this happening, where you have such discontent between the different factions, and each faction of people hold a majority opinion, like that, basically unchallenged among people similar to themselves. And the only thing that's going to cause is really instability, and I think it's going to cause a lot of problems too. Um, Specifically in our political system, where you're gonna have, this is also gonna apply to like the mainstream media. They're also gonna be targeting, these people too, and it causes a lot of resentment. And what you're gonna have is you're gonna have the people strike back, and uh, I don't think that will end well, particularly, because when people are really discontent, they might elect someone like Donald Trump. And I kind of find this ironic because we're only in we're a factor of this reason of this current situation is Trump himself. So it's a bit. I feel like it actually is more obvious because of Trump, and I'd say what he did to really change politics as a whole. Even though he's not even in office, he's significantly relevant to our modern political discourse and what we're discussing, and really, you know, it's a really significant problem. And that was sort of the conclusion for this video. Because I think if we don't address this, then we're gonna have serious problems. Because you know what happens when you have a large discontented uh, poor population, what's going to happen to them? They're going to first rebel, and they're going to look to some possible authoritarian who might, want to significantly alter the country, possibly for the worst. So, hope you all enjoyed this video. I think this actually is a pretty important issue to discuss because I feel like it's not discussed enough. People are too busy talking about elections 2 years over almost 3 years from now. People are talking, oh, who's the best candidate for 2024, Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump? Like at the end of the day, it's not even that significant at all, really. And once we talk about, these major economic issues and cultural issues that are plaguing our society, then, you know, we're fucked. We should be discussing this, finding, solutions to these problems. And I don't think that one politician or a group of people can change this. I think it's going to take possibly more than a decade of really just a change in how the country, how people in the country think and act. And I don't think that it's looking that bright right now. So I hope you all have an excellent day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Farewell.